Good evening, and welcome to the You Don't Know What You Don't Know podcast. Sister Cleo, we always speak about back in the day wealth of Black Wall Street community. Today, I would like to talk about how that wealth was first obtained. First, I want to hear and talk about the people, and then I want to know how they made their money. Where did that Black Wall Street money come from? Since we know that around 1866, blacks were allowed to participate in the land rush, meaning they could claim 160 acres of land, pay a fee to homestead for 5 years, then finalize and become a landowner. It appears that wealth began with land ownership. It came from the sweat of people who lived in Greenwood district. I think it's important that we research back into history and find some of those people. These people, they were not mythical beings or images we conjured up. These are the true events of Black history that never reached our elementary, middle school, or high school history books. Those would have been years when we unconsciously developed our identity as Blacks and our self-worth. Black Americans have a rich history of contribution in this country, and we want to make that known. When we discuss the Black Wall Street Massacre, we want you to feel the struggles of the people. This Black history demonstrates the determination to succeed, the drive and strength to succeed, and it's about building a community, self-improvement, and realization of a dream. This massacre wasn't just a bunch of buildings that burned, or it wasn't just money lost. Lives were lost and dreams were shattered. Overnight, the reality of Black livelihood morphed into the destruction of dreams. It morphed into a terrorist act committed on American soil against Americans by American citizens. In this episode, we examine the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, a self-made Wall Street, hoping that we can learn from its success. Can Black Americans recreate the wealth and community similar to the Black communities of the 1900s? In starting this, the first thing we want to talk about is the founder, O.W. Gurley. O.W. Gurley moved to Greenwood in 1906. O.W. Gurley definitely had wealth before he moved to Greenwood, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that wealth. And he was a young businessman. When he moved there, he bought 40 acres of land, and he took that land and he only sold it to Black folks. One of the first businesses he opened was a boarding house because, of course, people come into Greenwood, and Greenwood being a rural area, they needed somewhere to stay. So he was smart enough to know that he needed to do that. He eventually built his boarding house into a bigger business and eventually opened a hotel. Greenwood was unpaved, and it was interesting how the territory or the land or the separation from Tulsa and Greenwood was marked by a railroad track. So Gurley was one of the founders. He also founded the Vernon AME Church in Greenwood, which was interesting. Now, by 1913, Gurley had amassed wealth and properties. He had built homes and businesses in the city of Greenwood. What happened to him during the massacre was very interesting because there's several stories. And one story was that he was actually killed in the massacre, but other information shows that Gurley actually was exiled himself to California. But I don't understand, and the interesting thing is that Gurley had amassed $200,000 in wealth in 1921, which would be the equivalent today of $2.9 million. So this is interesting, and definitely want to do more research on O.W. Gurley.
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as Maddie mentioned, Greenwood was created in 1906 by O.W. Gurley. And he had purchased land on the outskirts of Tulsa and sold it exclusively to African Americans. And the land appealed to African American Southerners because they were trying to escape Jim Crow laws from other parts of the South. And many of them came to Tulsa to work, even though they couldn't live in Tulsa or shop in Tulsa. They were happy to be able to have a community where they could live, and that was in Greenwood. Eventually, Greenwood grew into the most famous and most prosperous Black community in the United States. Now that's saying something. Greenwood focused on a road named Greenwood Avenue, and many flourishing Black businesses were located on Greenwood Avenue. The thing to note is that Greenwood Avenue does not exist in white neighborhoods. It runs out in the Black community. Greenwood residents, they took pride in having their own community, their own stores, just their own. And for instance, the dollar in Greenwood in 1920, 1921, the dollar would circulate 36 to 100 times. Now that is amazing, for a dollar to circulate that many times in a Black neighborhood. A single dollar would stay in the Greenwood community almost a year before leaving the community. But let's talk about today. Today, a dollar can circulate in an Asian community for a month, in a Jewish community for 20 days, and in a white community for 17 days. But it leaves the Black community in 6 hours. That is unreal. Unbelievable, but true. And this is according to the NAACP. Now, Greenwood was a suburb of Tulsa, but Tulsa considered itself as part of two Greenwoods, of two Tulsas rather. And they referred to Greenwood as Little Africa. Now, we need to note that Greenwood was one of the most successful African American communities ever. And it became known later, well, let me just say, first of all, it was called the Negro Wall Street. As it prospered, it became known as Black Wall Street. In the 1920 city directories listed 108 businesses, including two newspapers, and that's located in Greenwood. The businesses there were 22 churches, 30 cafes and restaurants, 41 grocery stores and meat markets, 2 movie theaters, 2 airports. Can you imagine? 2 airports, 6 private airplanes, 1 hospital, 1 bank, a school system, which was described as being exceptional compared to the ones in the white area. Also, 15 physicians and attorneys. Now, the area at the intersection of Greenwood and Archer Avenues, That was known as Deep Greenwood and described as more advanced economically than some of the white areas because most white establishments refused to serve African Americans. Then Black entrepreneurs, that meant they held a captive market. Deep Greenwood had clothing stores, funeral parlors, billiard halls, hotels, barbershops, hairdressers, shoemakers, tailors, nightclubs, and it was a center for jazz and blues music. They were proud to live in that neighborhood, in that community, have your own. The only reason they had to go to Tulsa was that some of them worked in Tulsa. But other than that, they had their own stores, their own restaurants, their own barbershops, beauty shops, their own doctors and lawyers. So looking forward to the next chapter, Maddie.
When we started looking at the families in Greenwood, I wanted to find a family that was really interesting that I could present to you. And the family that I found and fell in love with was the Williams family. The father's name was John Wesley and the mother was Lula Williams. John was born in Mississippi and Lula was born in Tennessee. They both moved to Tulsa around 1903 and they had a son in 1905. His name was William Danforth Williams. And so John Wesley, the father, he was a machine operator. He was a good machine operator and made a very good wage. And John Wesley also was the first person in Greenwood to purchase an automobile. This was really big. So he purchased his automobile, but he realized once he purchased his automobile that he needed a mechanic. And of course he could not take his new car to Tulsa. So he learned how to work on his car. And when the other residents of Greenwood started to purchase their automobiles, they also started to take their automobiles to John. At some point, John was working on so many automobiles that he was able to quit his job as a machine operator and open a auto mechanic shop. So that was his business. Now, his wife, Lula, she was enterprising as well. And she opened a confectionery store where she sold floats and sweets and treats. And it was said that a lot of people in Greenwood got engaged while sitting in Lula's confectionery store, having a root beer float or some kind of sweets. Lula eventually opened a movie theater, and her movie theater became so successful because, again, Blacks couldn't go to the movie theater in Tulsa. And her movie theater was so successful that she opened a second movie theater, which she named the Dreamland Theater. Both of her enterprises were really successful. Now, the Williams family, they also opened boarding houses and other enterprises. They had a lot going on. And so that was why I wanted to talk about them. And also their 6-year-old son, William Danforth. Of course, his mother, under his mother's tutelage, was very enterprising herself. And I will talk a little bit more about William Danforth in the aftermath and after, as we learn what happened to the residents of Greenwood. Now, back to Lula and her 2 movie theaters in Tulsa. Later, Lula opened movie theaters outside of Tulsa, one in Okmulgee and one in Muskogee, Oklahoma. So she actually had 4 movie theaters, confectionery store, and several houses that they rented out and also lived in. This was a very enterprising family in Greenwood in the 1920s.
Boy, she would have been enterprising today.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you about one of the founders of Greenwood, Andrew Jackson Smitherman, better known as AJ, as a lot of the men were known back in that time by their initials. Now, he was born December 27th in 1883 in Childersburg, Tennessee, to James and Elizabeth Phillips Smitherman. His father owned a coal mining business and a general store and had 80 employees. His mother was a school teacher. Now, the fact his father would be exceptional today to own a business and have 80 employees. The family lived in the Muskogee part of the Creek territory. Now, AJ went to college. He went to Northwestern University. He went to LaSalle University, the Extension campus in Chicago, and he got his law degree from LaSalle University's main campus in Boston. He married Ollie B. Murphy of Sevier County, Arkansas in 1911, and that's where I was born. They had 5 children. Now, AJ, his political agenda is so tremendous. Let me just run through a few things. He advocated for the Black community to diversify their political voice. He felt that the Republican Party took advantage of the Black vote. He fought for voting rights. He regularly attacked people who were in power. He often advocated for the necessity of Black men to take up arms and protect your own community from racial violence. He fought for anti-lynching legislation. I have lost something here. Let's see. He protested corruption of the white Republican city administration and the way they treated the African American community. 1908, AJ returned to Oklahoma to work for attorney William H. Twine, who owned a weekly newspaper called the Muskogee Senator. And AJ worked for that paper as a law clerk and journalist. That was in 1908. 1910, AJ attacked what he called the guardianship racket, where he fought for families when white men tried to become guardians of freedmen and Native American families. They would petition the court claiming that the parents were either insane or incompetent or unfit to raise their children. And this was how white men stole property and mineral rights from these families. An example of AJ's work is when a Creek freedman named Warrior Renty, who was also a co-editor of a Muskogee newspaper, Renty received notice that a guardian, how are you going to receive notice that a guardian has been appointed for your child? You knew nothing about it. So he took his case to Twine and Smitherman. They published the story and in the process found over 3,000 similar cases showing that $100 million had been stolen from Native American and Black families. So when they exposed this in the newspaper, the public outcry and Smitherman's and Twine's legal work helped in getting the case decided in favor of renting. Now, 1911, Smitherman was elected president of the Associated Negro Press, and held the position for 11 years. At that time, he left the cemetery and started his own newspaper, the Muskogee Star. In 1913, Smitherman moved his family to the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, where J.B. Stratford provided funding for Smitherman to launch his new venture, which was the Tulsa Star. In 1917, because of his advocacy, 36 members of a white mob, including the city's mayor, were arrested for burning at least 20 homes of Black families. 1918, Smitherman interceded in stopping the lynching of a Black boy who was saved, but Smitherman went to jail, where he escaped the next day and wrote about the incident in the Tulsa Star. In this same year, Smitherman led an armed group of Black men to Bristow to protect Edgar Bohannon, who was charged with robbing and shooting a white man. Smitherman sent a telegram to the governor, therefore preventing the lynching. In 1920, Smitherman wrote in the Tulsa Star, describing a Black boy who was held in jail in Oklahoma City and turned over to a white mob and lynched. This is what Smitherman wrote, quote, "While the boy was in jail, and while there was danger of mob violence, any set of citizens had a legal right, and it was their duty to arm themselves and take a life, if need be, to uphold the law and protect the prisoner." Thank you. See you next time.
Sister Cleo, I had a couple questions that I was going to ask, but I'm going to hit pause real quick. Okay, so I said I had a couple questions. I don't have questions. I actually have comments. One is on Renty. So what I would wonder is, Renty won his case against being judged incompetent. I would like to know what happened to, and I know we can't find this information, but even after he was found incompetent, sometimes people don't want to admit or to let a ruling go as is. They want to do something different. So I would wonder, those people that wanted his land, did they actually leave him alone after they lost the case, or did they force him off of his land? I would wonder that. So, like I said, I know we don't know the answer to that. That's just something that I thought about.
Well, we do know that, he was he won the case,
Right?
But they've never said what happened after then. Maybe I need to Google his name or something.
Yeah, because I would be interested in knowing, just like this election. There's been a declared winner, but you got people that are not accepting that. So were they not accepting the verdict that Renty was capable of taking care of his family, and you didn't need to take his land for him to be okay? Were those people that were trying to steal his land, were they satisfied with that? My second thing is, I wanted to discuss, because I really like the O.W. Gurley, Ottawa Gurley, and the J.B. Smitherman, and the A.W. Williams and stuff, but just to have a discussion on why these gentlemen back in this day found it necessary to use their initials. Did that mean anything? What was that about?
I read something about that, where that was common, and something about it would make it I don't know. Some it would make it harder for people to actually, white people to actually, I guess, be able to track them if they had to.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a little girl, I think most of my relatives down in Arkansas, the men used initials,
Mm-hmm.
but they
Mm-hmm.
probably didn't know why they were using them,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But
Absolutely.
uh-huh. But
Yeah,
I
because
did read something. I read something about that. We can bring it up.
okay, and I read something similar to that. They use those initials because white people, in order to disrespect them, instead of calling them Mr. Jones, they would call them Robert. You know,
Oh,
even when they were old, they would call them Robert. So you
mm,
couldn't disrespect them and call them by their first name if they were using initials. So it was
mm.
kind of sort of like coded way of not allowing you to disrespect me. That's
That
kind of
sounds like what I read too.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
but I just thought that that was really bright. And the one more thing that I did want to mention is this week I was watching, James Avery has a special, and we know James Avery has passed on. So I'm sure it's an older, well, it is an older special, but it was on the beginning of Blacks coming to America. And it actually started in 1619. One of the things that really got me as far as these people and their talent now is when the slave masters, when they brought people from Africa, they didn't just bring anybody that was captured. They brought skilled labor.
Hmm.
So they weren't just bringing, just whoever was captured. It was skilled labor, meaning they needed canals, they needed cotton, they needed machinery, they needed people to do work so that they could stand around and crack a whip.
Mm.
So, it's like when we always want to talk about a lazy people and a slovenly people, if you look at them, that's exactly what they were. And so what they needed with the slaves was, because they tried to enslave Indians. So what happens when you enslave an Indian in their land? They escape and they run and they can hide. But if you take a slave or a person from a different country and bring them to another country, they have nowhere to run.
Mm-hmm.
One, because they don't know the country.
Mm-hmm.
Two, if you use Black people, they stand out. You got a crowd of white folks, you're gonna spot that black face and he's out of place.
Mm-hmm.
So they could spot them right away. And also they needed because they had so much work with the cotton and tobacco and stuff, they needed a labor force that they could control, and that would be slavery. And they needed a workforce that no matter what, it was reliable. So they could control it. It was reliable. The people that they had enslaved were identifiable, and they really couldn't run anywhere because they stuck out like a sore thumb anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Blacks from Africa, skilled Blacks from Africa were the perfect people. And that's why after slavery, Blacks came up so quickly because they were skilled. And I'm assuming that like the how do you say, the code of using the initials, I'm sure that these people pass these trades down to their to their kids. And
Mm-hmm.
so, so the slave master might not have knew about it, but they passed those trades down. That's why you got Smitherman's father having this business, because he already had that savvy, so
Mm-hmm.
it's like they had that. So I thought that was interesting. I want to say it's a 9-part series, and I haven't watched it all, but it's really interesting because it introduces a lot of thoughts about slavery and people coming to America and the process, and how there was a lot of forethought and malice to bring in Black people to America.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just thought it was interesting to kind of throw those things in before we went on to the,
You should have recorded all of that. That's
the
interesting.
yeah, I'm recording.
Oh, okay.
The demise of Greenwood. Before we go on to that, I wanted to throw all that in there because I was just so excited when I was watching that special. I was just sitting there and I was trying to take notes, and I couldn't take notes because I wasn't hearing, and I had to rewind it, but it was just a lot of good information.
Was it
So
on YouTube?
it's on Netflix. I was watching
Okay.
Netflix. Yeah, and I don't even know how it came. Stuff just pops up. I have no control in Netflix. But, but yeah, so it was a James Avery The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the father.
The father.
Yeah. He does. He's the narrator in this story, and so again, it's very, very interesting. And I'm going to finish watching it. So and it takes us all the way to I would assume up until when he started to get ill, to his illness. Because I remember last time I saw him, he was in a wheelchair.
Really?
Yeah, I was at Sister Melinda used to do the parade, the Watts Parade. So Ronnie, as a pharmacist, had a car in the parade. So me, her, and Zizi would ride in the car in the parade and do the parade wave. You know the parade wave? Yeah, we did the parade wave. But so before the parade, there was a breakfast at that place on 103rd and Success. There's a little restaurant there. And so the last time I saw James Avery, he was there and he was in a wheelchair.
I'll be done.
He was still himself because he had that booming voice. Yeah, so he had that really nice voice. So he was there. But yeah, so he did that special. So I'm imagining maybe 2010 or 11, something like that. Yeah. So I'm gonna keep watching it. Yeah. And so when I come across it, I'll make sure I find it where it is and check to see if we could find it someplace else. Because that's something just to kind of throw into as we do this, to throw in more information, and more information is better. Because we Black folks, we need more information.
Oh yeah. Because like James Avery, I knew he died, but I didn't even know he was sick until he died. It's just, woo.
Yeah,
back in the day, everybody would have known by the time my grandfather rode his horse and over there and told so-and-so, and by the time church started on Sunday, everybody would have known.
Everybody would have known.
All this technology, I had no idea that man was even sick.
So Corn was saying, and I don't know how he knows, I'm gonna have to ask him. He says Stevie Wonder's sick right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was trying to look, and I'm gonna try to find out something about him because, he's like staple is the wrong word, but he's a staple. You know what I'm saying? In Black culture, Black Christmas songs, Happy Birthday. He's a staple and all that kind of stuff. So we want to keep up with Stevie. Yeah. How they say we want to hold him up.
Hold him up. That's true. Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I went to see him. He must have been, I don't know. Is he old? I think he's younger than I am.
He's younger.
But he was like 6 or 7 or something.
What?
Wow. And I saw at that age was Michael Jackson. He was like 6 or 7. And they came to Toledo.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. He was just a little something, just a little cute little boy. Yeah. I remember Stevie. Yeah. Time passes so fast.
Time passes. Lord have mercy. Time passes. Sometimes I look at myself and it's like, who is that? She look old. What's that? What happened?
Everything has changed. And maybe you're not there yet where you would notice. I mean, even the texture of my hair is 100% different. And I